Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. The Bennington Select Board, Monday, December 9th, 2013. Time is 6 o'clock p.m. Will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before I go through the agenda we have tonight, on the 28th of October, our meeting there, we were discussing the ordinance that's been called panhandling. I acted improperly. When I addressed Mr. Ron Conroy, I see he's here tonight. I want to personally, on camera, on sound, apologize for my actions and my words that I directed to you. It was not personal. I know with your service and mine, I know you took the same oath as I did at one point in time when you came into service, and a chord was struck. I took personally. I should not have, and I know better. So, Mr. Conroy, I apologize to you here in public tonight, and I hope you accept that apology. Next item on the agenda, minutes from November 25th.
I'll move to be accepted as printed.
Okay?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion on those minutes? Okay, not all in favor? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Abstain, 1. So it's 6-4 and 1 abstain. Okay, next item on the agenda, warrants. We'll start with you, Tom.
I have no questions that have not already been answered. Thank you.
Okay, Greg?
Same here. All set, thanks.
John?
I had a question on page 5, the Aqua Zumba director.
Okay, what's the line number on page 5?
It is 305672.
Okay.
Yes, the rec center offers a class in Aqua Zumba. This is a certified instructor. The fees essentially paid for her costs.
Okay. Is that it, John?
Yep, that's
Justin?
I have no questions on the ones, so.
Jim?
Nothing this week.
Sharon?
I just have one, Stu, on page 7. It's the VRS sales, the repairs to ladder 939. Was that just routine stuff, do you know, or was it an accident?
Let me see. I think this was just routine work on the truck that is required as part of our certification process.
Okay, that's all.
That's it? And I have nothing. Okay, next item on the agenda is citizens. Any citizens out there would like to come up and address the board? Come on up. State your name.
My name's Loyal Westcott. I'm from Bennington, and I'm going to give you some more information about what landlords are doing in the town of Bennington. There's only a handful of them that are doing it. You all might recall the one that got caught lying when he was told to fix certain apartments up. He called him back, said he had done it. When in fact he hadn't. He got fined $140,000. It's putting our community in danger by renting into these violent criminals. And that's why I'm pursuing, so you can see I've got proof that his credibility goes right out the window. He's knowingly and willingly renting to violent criminals, rapists, and everything else. Now, when I lived at 450 Main Street, I had a lot of criminals. I kept getting them arrested that he kept putting in there, and some of them were already on probation of sorts. So he can't say he didn't know what they were. And some were sex offenders. Some were drug addicts. Some were drug dealers. They were manufacturing drugs. I ended up smelling the drugs that they were making. Now, I don't know what kind they were, but the police did raid it. You know, I mean, and like I said last time, 337 School Street, that landlord knew he was on probation of sorts. He's dead. There's been 4 drug overdoses in a year and 3 weeks, give or take a week or two.
Okay.
You know, and the 1,000-foot rule, we need that because there was one sex offender living right next to the Sacred Heart School. Again, the same landlord rented to him. Now, thank God he's in jail. He got 15 years to life on one, and he's got another case pending.
Stuart, do our police officers routinely check the sex offenders roster to see?
Yes, they do.
They do. And do you know of any law, or is there any law that says that a landlord cannot rent to someone who has been on probation from the courts?
No. In fact, the corrections department banks on it. that they'll be able to rent and find homes for these people.
I thought we received a briefing at one point in time. They told us that down here. Yeah. Okay, I mean, we're checking it, and that's what we can do.
Yeah,
And,
because if you do that mandatory criminal background check, that would cut down on the crime that's happening in Bennington. Bennington is under siege right now by all different kinds of criminals.
Okay.
I've got a
Thank you
question.
for your time.
Good question, Evan?
Yeah, question, no, well, one for West, or Loyal and one for Stu.
Okay.
With respect to the landlords that we have in town that have been aware of drug activity, have they cooperated with the town and the police department in helping root out this behavior?
From my information that I have received, they have cooperated fully.
Okay. Have they gone, how far have they gone? Have they gone so far as to
Well, depending on the
report
neighborhood that,
suspicious activity?
We're dealing with, we've got a cooperative agreement between the building inspection staff, the landlords, and the police department, so that when we are out doing normal building inspection routines in specified neighborhoods, we have very, very full cooperation from the landlords.
Okay. And for Loyal, point blank Loyal, what is it you'd like for the select board to do?
Pass a mandatory criminal background check. In the event they get caught renting to violent criminals, impose a $10,000 fine for each and every violation. Give them 30 days to get them all out, the ones that are in there. And then the 1,000-foot rule is to protect the kids.
Is that something we could actually do?
We can't find a landlord for renting to an individual.
The 1,000-foot thing, though, that's on convicted sex offenders that are on the register, right?
They are on their, yes.
But not necessarily on someone who's just on probation for some other,
I don't think the town has the authority to go after landlords because they choose to rent to somebody. I don't think the town has the authority to require landlords to do criminal background checks on their tenants. I'm not even sure that it's something that would be allowed on a routine basis anyway. Criminal background checks are a pretty deep background check. Yes, can you go on a registry and see something? Yes. Can you find out if somebody's on probation? Yes, but I would not support the town adopting a law that attempts to make landlords do criminal background checks on their tenants. If the landlord chooses to do that, I think that's up to the landlord. I don't think the town has a role to play in that relationship.
okay, Lowell, we've heard it, and we'll take a look into that 1,000-foot rule, but I believe it's because of sex offenders, the people on the roster, 1,000 feet from the schools.
School and parks.
Right. Okay, thank you, Lowell.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Any other citizens? Okay, if not, next thing on the agenda is the EPA, and Trish, are you going to talk this? Why don't you come on up here?
Vermont thing first.
No, we're going to do the DEC first, because I've got to go back to Burlington, then we'll bring up President Gross. Okay, you want to come up here and introduce yourself, and this is over the JARD site? If you just give us your full name and your position, please.
Sure. I'm Trish Copolino with the Vermont DEC. I'm the Brownfields Program Manager.
Okay,
And I have Linda Elliott and Chuck Shore with me with the Sites Management section.
right.
So the reason we're here is the state is requesting listing of the JARD site on the national priorities list. In order for the state to do that, we need to have support from the town before we can get a letter from the governor.
Is that better known as the Superfund site,
Correct.
that people would know? Okay.
Yes. So I'm going to go over the JARD site, so to give you some background on it and why we think this is a site eligible for that listing. EPA is going to go over the NPL process. So the JARD site, history-wise, started operation in 1969, and it stopped operation in around 1988. They manufactured capacitors, and the capacitors had polychlorinated biphenyls in them, or PCBs. They stopped using PCBs around, I want to say 1972, and then they switched over to diethyl hexyl phthalates, or dioctyl phthalate, DOP. In 1989, JARD declared bankruptcy. It was right around that same time that it was determined that there were impacts to the groundwater at the JARD site. In 1992, the state requested EPA removals to come in and assist with contamination that was identified on the site. And during that time, they removed 269 55-gallon drums, 461 capacitors, and 197 tons of PCB impacted soils. In 1997, the Jard building caught on fire. And then in 1997, we requested EPA come back again and assist with some more removal at the site. At that point, they looked at the building material, sediment, soil, and groundwater. In 1998, EPA came back again. They also repaired the fence that was around the site at the time. And then from 1998 to 2006, Vermont DEC was trying to manage the site as best as we could. In 2006, we did another investigation on the site on behalf of the town. And we looked at all media on the property and identified that there was still a lot of contamination that remained on the site. So in 2006, we requested EPA removals come back again and assist us with issues at the site. In 2007, they raised the building, they removed a lot of soil, and they capped it, and it's in its current condition right now. EPA actually removed 3,700 tons of soil and building material from the site for disposal. They put a 6-foot soil cap on the property and then grassed and seeded it, and the state maintains the cap right now. In 2010 to 2011, the Vermont DEC hired a consultant to start looking into groundwater impacts to try and make sure the site was still stable and look at other options for the property. At that point in time, we looked at the extent of groundwater and determined that the plume on the site was much larger than we actually had thought it was. We determined that there were impacts to surface water bodies, specifically the Duck Pond and the Roaring Branch. And we also determined that there were several homes on Park Street that had supply wells and they were still drinking the groundwater, and that groundwater was contaminated with PCBs. And then we also determined that groundwater along Park Street is very shallow. It was discharging during high flood events and spring snowmelt into the homes of the residents along Park Street and leaving behind PCB impacted soil. And also at that point in time, we determined that there was, and I have the last slide on here, has all of the acronyms I might have used, so you'll see them again. But floating and sinking free product in the groundwater, which would be pure PCBs, so light non-aqueous phase liquid and dense non-aqueous phase liquid. And to give you an idea, basically at the site from 6 feet down to 32 feet in specific areas on the site is still heavily contaminated with PCBs, which continues to migrate at the site and off-site. So from 2011 to 2013, we requested assistance from the EPA removals program again, and we asked them to determine the full impact to the Park Street residents, determine the downgradient extent of PCBs in groundwater, determine if there are any other sources of PCBs on the Jard property that we hadn't already identified, and then help us prevent off-site migration of the groundwater. And EPA removals helped us do all of those except for the last one. EPA removals came back in and they cleaned 2 residences along Park Street. They sealed their basements so that groundwater could not infiltrate into those homes again. They collected over 100 samples at the Little League field, the wetlands that are between the Park Street and the shopping plaza, and any other potential sources that might be on the Jard site. In 2012, we requested the NPL listing to help us get to the point of stopping the migration of groundwater off of the Jard site. And in 2012, the remedial program came in and finished characterizing the site to try to identify what might be remaining there. So what's left on the site right now? The groundwater is heavily impacted with PCBs. Shallow soils at the site, which shallow is 0 to 2 feet. Some areas are still impacted with PCBs. The deep soils greater than 6 feet are heavily impacted with PCBs. Residential properties still have impacts where there's groundwater discharge to those properties. And then the wetland located between Park Street and the shopping plaza is impacted with PCBs. We're here because the Vermont DEC does not have the financial resources to clean up the Jard site. And we are supporting listing this site to NPL so that it can get cleaned up. These are all the acronyms I just used. That's a PCB molecule, in case you were wondering what it looked like.
Keep an eye out.
We use ATSDR as a way to look at and explain the issues with PCBs. This is what they list as the first issue associated with PCBs, but they are carcinogenic and they do cause issues, both human and environmental. Lastly, this is the Jard site. I don't know how to use this. Jard is right here. This is the heavily impacted area of groundwater contamination. Groundwater contamination migrates all the way down to here in the wetlands. This is the extent that we know of groundwater contamination right now at the Jard site.
That's really moved then
So-
over the years.
Go ahead, Greg.
Does that follow the course of the river, basically, of the, traditionally, like, all the streams obviously drain into
Well,
the river basin? Is that pretty much the way the plume moves, or is that,
the way we see the Jard site groundwater is that it actually migrates parallel to the stream and doesn't actually discharge to the stream. In this area, you all know what the geology in Bennington is. It's very coarse gravel. This is just one large underground riverbed, basically, and so everything is migrating parallel. Eventually, and we haven't determined exact discharge yet, it's going into this wetland area and potentially flows this way to the Furnace Brook. We did do a lot of sampling in the Roaring Branch to find out where groundwater is discharging to surface water to see if we could pinpoint that specific area, and it changes daily there. The groundwater here is, and the geology is very complex.
Okay, other board members? Jim?
Is there any safe level of the PCBs? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how serious is this?
Well, you have to look at safe level versus, and how it's being introduced to people. So we have levels that we use for groundwater, if groundwater is being consumed. We have levels for surface water if fish is being consumed. We have levels for soil if soil is, following any of the pathways of ingestion, inhalation. So we exceed almost all of those levels, but it doesn't mean that all of those activities are happening. No one's drinking the water there anymore, so that's great. The locations where we're seeing impacts to surface water, there's no fishing there. The Jard site is mostly capped, but there's still areas that there could be exceedances for trespassers going onto the property. Same with the wetland area and some of the residential yards. So.
But I still don't have a clear understanding of how unsafe or safe it is.
Right now, we have it as safe as we can through the state. There are definitely areas on the property that could be safer. And based on any changes in the subsurface, there could be a large discharge someplace that we can't control right now because the groundwater is so impacted.
Okay. Tom?
There's been a lot of attempts at remediation, and it's not to admit that a failure, but is it just the lack of resources that have reached this point where we have to get the EPA in? That's the first part of the question. The second, maybe it's going to be waiting for the EPA to talk. What is going to be necessary to really make this site either not being contaminated or removal of contaminated material and not migrating, so that you see the Little League field, the duck pond, and all of these places where Bennington habitates. Maybe it's a complex question to a more complex answer.
There's failure everywhere, I would say. I think everyone that's tried to work on the site has tried to do the best that they could to do a comprehensive site investigation. Unfortunately, science changes. What we see on the site changes all the time. I think we're at the best spot we can be right now for completely understanding the site as best we can. There's still some more work that needs to happen. I can't comment on what is actually going to happen if this site gets listed, but it'll definitely involve a lot of public comment and a lot larger picture of the site itself.
Okay. Greg?
This overhead picture that you have right there is a good illustration of geographically what the role of that part of town was before we developed it. And you can see where Tropical Storm Irene came through there and moved a lot. Did you, I don't know if the studies were done in a way you can track it, but in an event like that, when we see a large amount of flooding, do we see the plume get larger? Does it move strategically, or is it more soil-based than water-based?
I didn't see a large change in the groundwater plume at all. For the most part, a lot of the shallower contamination was already removed by EPA, and luckily the cap that they put on and the berming system that was there stopped a lot of the erosion and any larger breaches that could have happened. But for the most part, it really didn't change.
I guess that's a good thing.
I mean, most of the contamination that we see is 20 to 30 feet deep, so.
Right, okay, thank you.
John?
So this kind of goes on the what would we do if we could question, but if you had unlimited funding, what would you do with this area to get rid of it once and for all? Unlimited funding, so not just trying to do the bare minimum to reach certain levels, but to absolutely never have to hear about this again, what would you do?
Well, first I would remove all the contamination in the groundwater, so I knew that there weren't going to be any more discharges someplace else. And then I would remediate any of the impacts to the residences and any other potential pathways that are in the subsurface.
With everybody living in this general area, how would they be impacted during that time?
Well, there's some groundwater that migrates under their property, but this is if I had unlimited funds.
Right, so they would have to leave, they would have to leave, and then we'd have to build a new house for them when they are allowed to return. I guess I just don't want to see another temporary fix, I guess, and then come back in another 4 years trying to figure this out again.
Right. I
So
mean,
I'm just trying to get my mind wrapped around it.
I'll let EPA folks speak for this, but my impression has been that removals helps with immediate threats, and the remedial program is going to help for the long-term big picture.
Justin, you have anything?
The site itself, where it's been capped with the 6 feet of soil, is that pretty stable?
It is.
The issue now is the push of the groundwater. So is that, am I picturing this correctly?
Right. There's still a couple locations on the site that have some impacted PCB soils, but the actual capped area is very stable.
Because they weren't capped, or because it's pushed up through the cap? Do you know the answer to that?
There are areas that weren't removed
Okay.
initially, and then there's a larger stockpiled area that is on the site.
Do you know why they left those areas untouched originally?
I don't know if sampling ever extended to a small wooded area.
Okay.
And then there's a stockpile from Tropical Storm Irene, removal of soils.
Thank you.
So I think what I've heard is, first of all the neighbors in the neighborhood have been alerted to the issue that we've got. We've taken preventive measures on capping, sealing basements, and we're still testing wells, are we, out there?
All the wells have been closed.
They've all been closed, okay. So we've got everybody on the public water system right now? Okay. And I guess what I'm hearing, DEC in the state of Vermont is supporting that we add the Jard site to the Superfund site.
Correct.
And you want our select board's approval also, or support also, to forward to EPA to be added.
Correct. We need to have a letter from Governor Shumlin to support
Okay.
this. And in order to do that, we would like support from the town to
Okay.
show the governor that the community
And-
supports it.
As I remember the Superfund site, I mean, there's a priority on there. Someone's going to take and prioritize, once it's added, where this will go. And so any guess at all about when we could see work being done?
I'm going to pass that off to
Chuck,
EPA.
Chuck, you want to come up and answer that? Okay, it's a tough question. I know it's unpredictable with the EPA, but I don't want people out there to think that just because we get it on the Superfund list, that it's automatically going to appear, we're going to see these folks coming down here.
There are actually folks from EPA that can address
Okay,
some of that.
is there somebody here who want to talk to that? Come on up and introduce yourself. Why don't you come up and introduce yourself, please? And
The only thing that I wanted to continue on was to move forward, and I know Megan's going to go over the process. We're looking for something from the select board by mid-January so that we can pass it on to the governor.
Got it.
If you approve it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, for the record, would you just please introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Megan Cassidy from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in Boston, and I have with me Martha Bosworth and Kelsey O'Neill. So some very good questions, and we're here to address most of those, so the timing is perfect. Again, as you know, Trish just informed you, the state came to us about a year ago and asked us to consider adding this site to the national priorities list because at this point in time, they did not feel that they had the resources to give a comprehensive, approach to this site. And that gets to, I want to speak very quickly to the Superfund process here, which again, the national priorities list is part of that process. But the emergency removal program, which is the program that has worked at the Jard site on a number of occasions from our office, has a very specific purpose within the Superfund program. And they do not intend, and in fact, the statute almost prohibits them from addressing a site comprehensively. They have a limited mission, and it is to address more immediate short-term issues. Very rarely are they able to fully and comprehensively address a site, which is why, again, they came back based on changing conditions at Jard to address short-term. The fire resulted in certain, conditions, drums, things like that. So here we are again. This is just a schematic showing a little bit about the Superfund process. And if you notice, the red circle up on your right is sort of that evaluation. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to, is the evaluation process where we decide, we triage, if you will, sites. And you can see one of the possibilities there is the removal program, or to come in and stabilize, address short-term risks. But again, they are prohibited from addressing a site comprehensively. So now is, I think the states, our New England states, we cover all of New England. And in the more recent years, the last few years, obviously the economy is getting very tight and states' resources are being limited. So the federal Superfund program is often viewed at this point as a program of last resort in order to fully address sites like the Jard site and others that have long-term source issues, if you will. Adding sites to the national priorities list is really the only way that we can provide the resources, both technical in-house folks with certain expertise and obviously the financial resources to get these sites to a situation where they are considered stable for the long term. Most of them are ready then to be reused in the interim if that's what the communities want, and that ranges. We typically work with communities to think about the future of these sites as well. So again, I just wanted to follow up some of those questions that Trish was asking. Those really, no one has ever really tried to remediate the site. And that, I think, is the process that the state is asking us to initiate at this point. So again, the Superfund process is a long process. We would start with investigation, evaluate the cleanup, and as Trish said, really the problem here, and we need to get at that source, there is a very large amount of PCB contamination at depth that will continue for a significantly long time to create problems of the short-term nature. So in order to, rather than address the site with Band-Aids, kind of get at the source, really the only option at this point is to add it to the national priorities list. And I think that is where the state has come to us to bring those resources to bear. So again, I think you are familiar, most of you, with the national priorities list. It is simply a list of sites across the country that EPA, the federal government, acknowledges need to have detailed evaluation. We need to know exactly what is at a site, what the contamination is, what the risks are, and then evaluate the most appropriate remedial alternatives to get that site, excuse me, to a condition where it is safe for the environment, for the local folks around, and it is a permanent solution. So that would be the goal of adding it to the national priorities list. In order to be added to the national priorities list, the agency evaluates sites, and we make additions to the national priorities list only twice a year. It's a federal rulemaking process, so it is a, a bit of a, time-sensitive process. We currently, as I said, federal rulemaking, we put a notice in the Federal Register twice a year saying we're going to list sites. There's a 60-day formal public comment period. Once comments are evaluated and responded to if necessary, we then do another Federal Register to actually get the site on the national priorities list. Typically, during that period from proposal to final, there is some interim work that can be done at a site, but we cannot really expend significant federal resources on a site until such time that it is a final NPL site. So again, there's a, it takes a year or so to get through that process, which is why, again, we wanted to get out and speak to you and hopefully answer your questions to get to the point where the state can get a letter from the governor, if appropriate, if the town feels this is the best approach for this site. Again, just quickly, state role in the NPL listing. The federal government, at this point in time, federal government does not place a site on the national priorities list unless the state governor concurs with that listing. So at this point in time, I know this, the DEC has been working and trying to consider getting that letter, which is why we're here tonight, to help give them that support and hopefully, get a letter of support from the governor. And I can speak at the end of this about the timing for that letter and for getting the site possibly proposed and finalized.
Once we get on the list, will you be dealing directly or notifying the town directly, or will we be sending information on status of where we appear on the list, and we go through the state of Vermont, or would we come to the town directly?
We would end up working directly with both the state and the local community. Kelsey works in our, community involvement. She does community involvement, congressional affairs, local affairs. A very big part of the Superfund process is communication, public outreach. Typically, we work with the community to see what works for that community. It may be small neighborhood meetings, but absolutely sharing information is a very big part of the process for us. And we work very closely at these Superfund sites with our state counterparts. Typically, there are project managers from both the state and federal government who work together during the process to, evaluate the site and help with the decision making.
Okay.
And the only other thing I just want to clarify, because once a site gets on the list, there is no prioritization, if you will, of the list itself at this point in time. The priority is an assessment of which sites get on the list versus which don't. So it's really a scoring, if you will. It's just a benchmark to see which sites go forward.
Okay.
And rather than once you get on it, we don't rank them 1 through 100 or anything like that. So
Great.
we work on the sites as they come in.
Okay. Tom, do you have something?
What are the ramifications to our community, i.e. Expenses that we might find our community facing if they are designated, it's listed on the site?
I'm going to go back for a moment, if you don't mind here.
Sure.
I think the short answer for this site is that there are very few, if any, financial implications for the JARD site. There is a requirement that any site placed on the national priorities list that we fully evaluate what we call the availability of potentially responsible parties to pay for cleanup. And that is, again, shown here on the diagram. Now, my understanding, and we're in a good place here at JARD because our removal program has been here on several occasions. We've already done quite a bit of that legwork to see, are there any corporate, what we're typically looking for is just because the facility closed, are there any corporate, veils or anything that can be pierced to find money? Because we go, the Superfund statute is based on the premise that polluter pays. So first and foremost, you look for someone who's available. Our understanding at this point in time is this would be a fund lead site, so it would be primarily funded out of EPA's annual appropriation from Congress. There is a requirement once we get to building the actual remedy that there is a state share. The state is typically required to provide a 10% cost share for the final remedy, not necessarily the early on investigation. We fund that out of the federal dollars. And that's basically why there is a requirement for the governor to concur, because, ultimately there is a small, it is a small percentage. It can be obviously, I'm not suggesting it's a small dollar commitment, but that's really why we require that the governor acknowledge and concur with sites going on the national priorities list, because at the state level, there is a financial investment.
So, thank you.
Other board members?
Yeah, I had a couple questions, actually. I've heard a couple times that it's not safe and we need to make it safe. But then we've also talked about how no one's drinking the water. The soil seems to be at levels where it's not affecting us. I guess, can you paint me a nightmarish picture of what if we don't do anything?
Okay, one, I won't, the site is currently safe. There have been a number of studies and a number of indications where, and again, that's really the basis of calling in and addressing short-term issues. There were short-term sort of issues with people drinking, that still had wells, they were drawing water. That's been addressed. The intrusion into people's basements, that was a current exposure, if you will. I think what the state and EPA are now looking towards is, you want a permanent solution, so that doesn't, we don't find, if the contamination continues to migrate, for instance, and there's a significant source there, it will continue. So does it end up, showing up in another set of houses, 4 blocks down the road or something? Once there's a source, if you don't address the source, you're going to keep coming back for the short-term fixes. The site, as Trish and others have mentioned, there's been clean soil put on top of it. So again, your risk is based on your exposure. So if you are not in current contact, there's no current risk. But we do worry, Superfund statute and, the state programs typically, we're also looking at future exposure. The what if, what happens if that contamination continues to move? And again, it's coming up, in a wetland now, but if it came up at higher concentrations, would we have to come up and address another short-term risk? So again, there is, it is safe now. The conditions that we are aware of at this point in time, the site is safe, but we want to address it for the long term.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Just a question about this stuff. Does it ever decay to a level? That is to say, is it so stubborn a compound that it just doesn't break down in its constituent parts?
PCB is one of the most one of the more persistent contaminants.
Mm-hmm.
There are, certain classes of contaminants that do break down a little bit more naturally over time. PCBs are pretty persistent,
Mm-hmm.
which is, why we're going to have a source here for a very, very long time that needs to be addressed.
How long is it? How long is a very, very long time?
The science right now is forever. I mean, forever.
Forever.
I mean, hundreds of
Okay.
years.
Have to
I
find
mean,
out.
PCB
apocalypse.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've heard from the Department of Environmental Conservation at the state of Vermont and also from EPA. Does the board feel comfortable now making a motion and recommending that we send a letter to Governor Shumlin saying that the town of Bennington supports adding the yard site to the Superfund site?
So moved.
Well, I'm sorry.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I got a motion, second. Now discussion, John?
Yeah, I was just wondering how many other sites are you guys pushing to get onto this list? And, I mean, if we're looking at 50 others that are of a higher importance, even across the state or even New England, then I wouldn't want to push to have our site, which is considered safe, on there and possibly outrank someone that actually needs it.
I think we heard there's not a prioritization of this thing. If they're going to look at it, if we get on the list.
Yeah. We want to be on top.
The experts could see that we may be a higher priority than somebody else on the list already. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, currently there are 115 sites in New England. Most of those, I mean, I will tell you, up until about 3 or 4 years ago, we had about a 10-year period in New England where we did not put any new sites on the list, which, again, that's a success, because at that point, a lot of our state programs were addressing some of the sites. Again, a great thing. So we have a lot of sites that are what we call mature. They're, we're sort of monitoring them. We're making sure that all the work continues to be safe. We currently are proposing in New England 1 to 2 sites a year. This, again, is sort of one that we see on our radar for 2014. Now, currently, we have made a decision within our, New England district that these new sites, at least initially, we will get out and start the investigation and make sure we have a good handle on what we're faced with, and then continue to, move it and fund them as we can. We have an annual appropriation from Congress. It's important that I be open and frank about that. This is a long process. Look, when we're going in to address the long term, this is not like when the EPA has been here before for short-term actions. These investigations will take years. And, getting to the point where we are actually implementing and building will be many, many years from now. But until you get, until we get on the list, we can't even get in the queue. So again, that is certainly something for you to consider. But again, I think that's why the state has started to ask us to look at some of these sites. Because, yes, ultimately there will be a queue for divvying up our work, but if you're not in the queue, then, I think the state can speak to their ability to just monitor the site, perhaps. I'm not going to put words in their mouths.
I actually had a question for Stuart mostly. From the management's perspective, are there any downsides we're not thinking about or that we should make people aware of when something like this comes around?
In this particular case, the staff wholly supports the listing. I think Megan has just detailed how long it will take to understand what the cleanup is. And some of these processes where you're trying to clean up a groundwater contamination, once they're decided, they go on for years. So we're likely to have a relationship with DEC and EPA on this particular site for another decade or perhaps more. So I think it is important that it gets on the list. I think it's in the best interest of the people who live near the site. It's in the best interest of the town, therefore, and I would encourage you to support the motion.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I'm sorry if I missed this before, but once it is, let's say it gets in queue, it's determined that action's going to be taken, who decides, or are we told what will be done? Because we are around, there's a lot of things going on
You won't
there.
be, again, the process, and I think, if we need to, Kelsey can speak to it, but once a team is put together, we are typically sort of in the community working, again, with whether, there's a designated group in the town giving, regular updates, things like that. There are also opportunities for citizens groups, if they wanted to come together and apply for what we call technical assistance grants to help understand things. So the Superfund process, national priorities lists, typically come with quite a bit of communication and involvement with the community. There are certain points within the process by statute that we're required to hold public meetings and hearings, that being one of the biggest ones being the time when we determine or are actually deciding what we're going to do at a site. That's by law, we have to do that. But, I've been working in this program for 25 years, and we have go well and beyond that. Again, as a project manager, I never wanted to go have my first conversation with a community, at that point. So far more frequent, and again, it seems to vary by community because, again, different communities function differently, the neighborhood groups. So that's all part of the process, is usually a community involvement plan or some communication to see what works best for an individual community.
I'm in favor of the motion, the standing motion.
Any other discussion?
I appreciate the effort of the education tonight, because it's something that I certainly can use and received, and we look forward to working with you. The motion
Okay,
passes.
great. And then I'm just going to let you know that I think if we do get the governor's letter from the state at the end of January, what our goal is to try to propose this site in April, which, kind of, again, kicks off that proposal, 60-day comment period, and then the next time that we could make take an action on it would be the fall of 2014, but that is dependent on the nature of comments received. Right. Some sites we get no comments at all, which means we just then go ahead and finalize. And that would certainly, obviously be the best case scenario. So again, the end of January letter from the governor would allow us to start start taking action in April, which I think would be, obviously the best thing for the town if that's what you're, what you're looking for. So I appreciate your time.
Right. For the new members on the board, this is the first time we've had DEC in front of the board for a long time, but DEC, State of Vermont, are not strangers to Bennington. They've been working with us on petroleum cleanup funds. They've been working with us on the village over there in the new, what's it, Paper Mill Village. And Tristan's been down here looking at the building and stuff. So these are folks that deal with us on a routine basis. They're familiar faces out there from the state of Vermont. So I got a motion and a second. We've had discussion. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you, folks. Have a safe trip back to Montpelier and those long distance, and watch some black guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to change around on the schedule here. We've got,
Just a quick follow-up
Yep.
question. The staff will draft a letter. Do we want it for your signature as the chair?
how's the board feel
I
about
think the
that?
board should sign it.
Board?
Maybe-
board to sign it?
Yeah,
do
I
it
think
for the
that
board.
would be a little more
Are
impactful.
we going to meet next Monday? Is that the plan?
We'll discuss that.
We're going to talk about that
Yeah,
later.
so, I mean, 'cause that would make that
It
simpler.
won't, it shouldn't take long to draft that letter and get ready.
It's only a week, yeah.
Okay, we're going to change on the schedule here. We have President Karen Gross here from Southern Vermont College, and we're going to move her ahead of the Rail to Trail brief that we're going to do. And I know Chuck is talking to the president.
Joe, I could lead off,
Okay?
if I could, please.
Sure.
Anytime a municipality decides to go for a bond in a particular project, it must find at a hearing such as this that the project is a necessity. Much like the state's taking of property, they have to have a necessity hearing. This meeting tonight is to determine that the project is needed, that the project benefits the community, that the town could not afford to do the project out of normal operating revenues. Therefore, we must bond for the property.
Okay.
And this is a unique, Karen, if you want to come up to the microphone, please.
Don't be shy,
Don't be
President Gross.
afraid.
This is a unique opportunity for us because we are partnering with Southern Vermont College on this project. They obviously have the land at the elevation we desire, and we need to construct a water tank there that will supply the necessary pressures to the system, and Southern Vermont College gets the benefit of being able to connect to the municipal water supply. They are already connected to the municipal sewer system.
President Gross, thanks for coming tonight.
My pleasure.
Busy schedule. The board has heard about this project, and we just, great to have you here to hear from your side, Southern Vermont's support of this project that we've got proposed here.
We most assuredly support the project and look forward to working with the town on it. It's one of those projects that benefits not only the town and the citizens and the hospital, but it also benefits the college. And so we're happy to partner, and I actually think it's this kind of partnership that's an example of what towns and colleges can do together. And I look forward to working with the town as we work through each and every piece of this and the allocation of the costs and the like. But I believe this is a project that's doing exactly what it should do, which is combining the needs and the interests of two parties, both private and public, to work together.
Okay. Any questions of President Gross? Jim?
I do. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
It's been, we've talked about it briefly before, but there are some water contamination issues, for lack of a better phrase, at SVC. Is that true or not?
Well, after the previous conversation, I want to be very careful
Right,
about
yeah.
contamination. The college has been on well systems and continues on well systems. And I think we would be better served by being on the town water system, which is regularly tested by the town. As the population at SVC has grown, we then test and respond, as does any location, to anything that comes up. As any location that has as many people as we do on our premises, have we had incidents? Yes. But our water is not contaminated
Okay, that was
as a
a
regular
poor choice of word.
matter. What we're trying to do is curb as we grow, the potential for more issues with respect to our water. And actually, the state would like us to go on town water. The view is that when you get as large as we are as an institution with as many people living on the campus, we do better, according to the state, to use the town's system. And so this is a way for us to get on the town's system as opposed to on our private wells, which we maintain, and we make sure the water is safe for our students and for cooking and for everything else. But this is a way of ensuring on a go-forward basis that we have quality water for our growing campus, while helping others in the process.
That's correct. And helping others, just so everybody, if they've missed the last few meetings we've had, the town is going to have to move forward by 2017 if we're not in another agreement, is that right?
That's correct. We would have to be moving forward with
By ourselves.
The elevation project issue by 2017, fiscal year 2018. This presents us a wonderful opportunity because the college is already on the state's priority list for moving to the municipal system. So we benefit by partnering with them now. We're able to go forward now. Obviously, we think the cost will be less expensive now. There is money available at the state level from their loan program now.
The lower interest.
Low interest, it's a 3% interest. So there's an opportunity here, I think, for the town to truly benefit, and if the college benefits too, then that's good.
So we still need voter approval, though. We have to come up with the cost.
What I gave you tonight earlier is the most recent estimate of the cost of the project and the breakdown of the shares. I apologize that it's in very small print. Also attached to that is a map which shows the location of the plant and what will be shared and what will be paid for, essentially by the college or by the town.
Okay.
And in summary, the cost to get the water from Monument Avenue up to Hunter Hall and the main part of the campus will be shared cost between the college and the town. The college will pay for each and every to their buildings, and then we will pay to run it from that main portion of the campus all the way up the hill to the water tank, 750,000 gallon water tank that will be placed discreetly above the Everett Mansion, hopefully out of sight for the college. The town will then take over and maintain the entire system. It becomes part of the municipal system, and therefore we will be responsible for the testing regimes and for hydrant flowing and all of that on an annual basis. The college will, of course, pay its prorated share on an annual basis as we pay back the loan. So they don't have to reach into their pockets and come up with a lion's share of the project for them. They can pay it annually, just as we will. And then they will also pay their water fees based on their consumption.
Now, how will this help the portions of town that don't have the proper?
What the elevation of this tank will provide is sufficient pressure, or head, as we call it, so that the water coming from this tank feeding the system will be able to push the water at the elevations that are necessary in the Crescent Boulevard area and in the Jefferson Heights area, so that those homeowners will have, I think it's 55 pounds at the water stop on a consecutive, continuous basis. And right now, they don't.
So no new water lines to support that?
We will have to upgrade some additional lines within the system once this project is done, but we will be able to handle those on an annual, continuing basis. This is the lion's share of the project, and as I said, it's an excellent opportunity to get this major portion done. And instantly, the hospital will benefit. Some of the other property owners in that region will benefit, but it will take some upgrade of some existing water lines before those other higher elevation neighborhoods see the benefit.
So are we ready to place this as an article on a ballot this March?
This is the first step. We need to adopt a resolution as I've prepared for you, and then we will hold at least one other public hearing, and I believe the timing of that can be consistent with the timing for the annual meeting, so that we don't have to do a lot of these meetings, but we will also have to post notices on the same date for 3 consecutive weeks so that the public is confirmed that they have been notified of the importance of the project and the cost of the project.
Okay, board members?
Question.
Can I just add to this, that the estimates, the numbers you have before you are estimates.
Right.
And I think that's important to recognize. We're all trying to keep the costs as low as possible. And the college is negotiating with the town as to what our aliquot share should be. And I'm quite confident that we'll come up with a number that's fair.
Okay, right. Tom?
So I understand the allocation percentage of the total project is being negotiated at this point, or will it be?
Well,
Or the dollar amount?
The share has been recognized. It's the cost that's being negotiated.
Sure.
And, depending on the bid environment, I mean, if we were successful in passing a bond in March, the engineers are prepared to bid the project as soon thereafter as legally possible. We could end up with some very attractive bids if we're early enough in the season. And if that's the case, these estimates may be lower, they may be higher, but those are the kinds of things that we need to continue to monitor, and we need to work very closely with the college to make sure that we don't put them in a position that is financially difficult for them in order to get this project done.
I have a question.
Can I answer yours, Tom?
I'm not sure. I guess once we know the actual cost of the project, the college will participate to a given level.
Yes.
Depending upon.
Their level will be established essentially by the bid vote, and the bid will be such that the shared portions of the projects will be able to be broken out clearly and cleanly. Their portions of the project, the connections to the buildings, will be able to be broken out clearly and cleanly, and then the remainder of the project will be ours.
The town has been very thoughtful in working with us, and I hope we're being thoughtful in return.
Yeah.
And the treatment of the monies that are our share can either ultimately be construed as fees or in other ways to enable the college to continue to operate as it does effectively. So I appreciate the sensitivity, and I'm sure we can find the right number.
Okay, Jim?
Because you, Stu, had said that the hospital would benefit so directly, would it be inappropriate to ask them to also partner with us on this?
Yes. Well, not inappropriate, that's the wrong term. The portion of the project that the town is going to pay for is going to be paid by fees.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the users are going to participate in the project cost that the town bears. So the hospital will benefit proportionately based on its use.
When you say that, are you saying that we're going to have to increase our current rate to pay for this?
Yes.
After 2 months ago, 3 months ago, we said there weren't going to be any more increases in the next few years for town water, town sewer. So, I mean, it can't come to a shock to people that they're going to see an increase again after we've already told them that it won't.
Well, the conversation we had talked about increases to cover depreciation, which is what the process we've just gone through over the last 3 to 4 years. This is a capital project. It requires a vote by the people of Bennington, and in order for it to go forward, the people of Bennington have to support it, and therefore they have a chance to have their input on whether or not the project goes forward and whether or not their rates go up. But their rates will have to increase. We haven't done the math because these estimates came to us today to understand exactly what that is, but before we go to the vote, we'll have it all lined out for people so that they'll know exactly. And remember, with the state monies, we don't have to start paying them back until a year after the project is completed. So if the project is completed in 2017, we don't start paying them back until 2018, which is probably fiscal year 18 or 19, depending on the timing. So there's time for the ratepayer to understand what the cost is, and to build themselves, or I guess brace themselves appropriately for the increase.
If this is completely enterprise fund related, correct?
That's correct.
Why does it go out then to an entire community as a bond vote for people that aren't part of that?
Under Vermont law, bonds, in order to borrow money on a long-term basis for a project, a capital project such as this, you need to essentially place the full collateral of the community behind it. Otherwise, the Vermont Bond Bank won't support it, and most other banks would not sell those bonds privately without the support and equity of the whole community.
And we've yet to receive bids on what the actual cost of this is going to be, correct?
Yes.
I guess it concerns me a little bit going out for asking for a bond for a specified amount and then kind of opening the door to what your top end is before you go out and ask for bids for a project.
Well, I mean, if our engineers are being as cautious as they tell us we are, we're looking at a high-end cost here, a very conservative estimate. If you'll recall, the rec center project was estimated some $50,000 or $60,000 higher than what the bids came in. And that's part of being conservative. You look for bond approval that will give you sufficient funds to finish the project and not have to go back again. But that is also a door that is open for you.
But these estimates are from engineers that they think they're going to come somewhere within this general ballpark?
Yes.
I mean, if we got bids that were...
To put the bid out, if I can, from bidding on government projects, to put the bid out, the money has to be approved by a body to even initiate the bid in a lot of cases. Like
True.
you can't go out and put out a bid and have all the contractors do all the groundwork and put together pricing and throw it to you and say, nah, we're not going to do that.
Well, I mean, it seems like you're throwing, you're really tipping your hand there as to what.
Well, when you get it, you pretty much assume that they don't expect to pay that much.
Yeah.
You'll get a bid with a budgeted number, and you pretty much better come in under that number.
How many
or you're
bids
not
are we
gonna see
expecting to receive on this project?
It's a very, very large project, so exact numbers I can't tell you, but most of the major contractors in the New England, New York area will take a look at this project. This is a very attractive project, and it's relatively easily constructed.
So you'd expect this to be very competitive?
It will be very competitive.
And what'll generally happen is you'll find the firms who really fit the profile. Different firms do different things well and are, efficient at different things. And if you get a good bid out, you'll find firms that are better at one thing than the other. And some of the bids can come in quite a bit lower than the budget.
But the worst-case scenario is we get voter approval on X number of dollars, and next spring when we go out for bid, the bids all come in higher than the voters approved. There's nothing saying we go forward with the project at that point in time.
Right, it's not authorized.
It's not authorizing you to do. We stop it, we go through the whole process again.
Is the
And,
bond up to, that's how the approval would be for the bond vote?
Yeah, actually, the Vermont law has very specific wording on bond votes, and Tom, I don't have it right off the top of my head, but you need to have a number, and I don't know whether it's the language is not to exceed or a maximum. I'm not entirely sure, but it's something along those lines.
But it gives us a flexibility, I would think.
Yeah, some.
Yeah, I mean, if it's approved, if we put it out for 3.5 million, bids come in at 3, we don't have to use the whole 3.5 million.
correct.
We'll just use.
No,
what
I
we
understand, but what I'm saying is I don't want to put a bid out for $3.5 million and have all the bids come in at
If I know that it's
$3.9999.
need. Well, then we wouldn't have a project if
Yeah.
it came in over.
Do they bid in the car business?
They do, they absolutely do.
One
yeah.
dealer against
Yeah,
another?
Fight, keep you on your toes all the time. Sure do.
I also want to say timeliness matters here, and part of the reason to do this now is because the town gets to take the same slot we have, which is a higher slot than the town otherwise would have, so that by partnering together, we enable the town to do this way sooner than they would otherwise be able to do it. And that's part of why we're doing this and partnering with the town, because they get to, in essence, slot in with us.
That's a very important point.
Yeah, that was my question for Stu, is what are the other options? I mean, say we did decide to pass on this, what is the town going to have to do, or what are the options if we didn't do this?
The options are, the state of Vermont has, in our operating plan, I think, called for this project to be underway by 2018. If we don't have the support and partnership with the college, we're going to be out there pretty much on our own, and we don't know whether or not we would be a high enough priority to gain the state's low interest rates. So when we borrow this, we're not going to the bond bank, we're going to the State Agency of Natural Resources Water Supply Division bank. It's a 3% interest rate. It doesn't change. The bond bank is probably currently running in the 4 to 5% right now on bonding monies. They just did a sale, and I think it was up over 4 for Vermont Bond Bank. So there's an advantage by doing it this way because we get access to the funds that are the low interest monies.
Okay, so we should read this resolution and ask for a vote on it, is that correct?
That's correct, and then I have an original to circulate for your
Okay.
signature.
Can the audience talk before you do that?
We don't have a motion yet.
We have a motion yet.
We don't have a motion. Yes, Mike, come on up to the mic.
Stay there. I got my chair, you got yours. Two things.
Introduce yourself, sir.
Mike Butler. Two things that are a little confusing. If you bond, does the payment get paid back through the water rates, did you say, or both the property taxes on this bond?
It's only water rates.
Unipre.
Only the water rates are going to pay the bond,
Yes,
so that'll be clear to the public.
yes.
But the whole community votes on it?
Has to.
Okay. And the other thing is, do we know what the percentages Karen's going to show out of her coffers?
I don't, I'd have to run the math to know what the percentage is. What we're looking at, Mike, is a project that we are sharing to a point, so it's lineal feet of pipe and so many connections, and then beyond that, it's all the town. So their share is really based on what the big cost comes in at.
But if I heard you correctly earlier, the way this is broken down now is the percentages. It's just based on how the bids come in, that it might fluctuate slightly. So this is what's projected as their share and our share.
That's, yeah, those are.
So that's 18%.
So they're going to pay 8%, so it comes in at $3 million, they'll pay 18% of the $3 million. If it comes in at $4 million, they'll pay.
Well, no, like Stu was saying, the project's separated into different sections, and so if our section comes in higher, then their percentage would look like it's going down, when in reality, it's just because our portion was more expensive. So right now, as it's projected, it's at 18%.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read the resolution. Town of Bennington resolution. Be it resolved that the Bennington Select Board has found it in the public interest to install a water main, pump station, and a 750,000-gallon water tank on lands of Southern Vermont College in order to comply with the state drinking water standards for public water systems. The estimated cost of this project is $3.3 million. The town must bond for these monies since it cannot fund this project from its annual income and revenue. Dated today, 9th of December 2013. Do I have a motion to approve a resolution?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion, further discussion? Not all in favor? And that is unanimous. President Gross, thank you for coming down. We know you have a busy schedule up there with the semester getting close to winding down. And
It is. And next week is final exam week, so.
great.
Enjoy the
Well,
holidays.
we're also looking forward to partnering with Southern Vermont College, and I know there's already been steps in town that we see Southern Vermont College downtown Bennington right now, and that's great to see the college kids and some of their paraphernalia down there, so.
I appreciate that. And I also just want to say that it's a pleasure to work with the town, and I think the process has been a very good one. And so the college is pleased to give an easement that makes this happen, so that's part of our contribution to this, so that it's not just economic. And there are also opportunities for our students to work with the contractors as and when they're on campus, which I think is hugely important too, as we make them workforce ready. So there are lots of ways that this project benefits the town, the hospital, the homeowners, but also our students.
We agree. Thank you again. Okay, the next item on the agenda, Dan, you want to come up? This is a rail trail update. This is something I know a lot of people in the community are concerned with and interested in. So, Dan?
Maybe a little history on the project and then where we are now and hopefully some direction moving forward. It's been well over 15 years probably since we originally obtained funding for a trail that would connect downtown Bennington to the Molly Stark School. over a period of time, it was determined that perhaps the best route was to go on the railroad right-of-way from Bennington Station, in the vicinity of the Molly Stark School. Back several years ago, and Stuart, maybe they'll help me when it was voted, but $100,000 was put into a reserve account to cover the town's share of that grant, which is a 10% share. And we were assuming at that time $1 million project. The good news is that one of the main stumbling blocks for this project has been overcome. We do have a written letter of intent from the railroad, Vermont Railway, to use that right-of-way for a rail trail, which means that the rails will be taken up and there will be a trail put in place of the railroad tracks. The other good news is we have news from our consultant that the path, projected cost for the path will come in significantly under that $1 million estimate, so we should have plenty of money in reserve to cover our 10% share. The next steps moving forward that I'm hopeful that the select board will feel comfortable authorizing this evening is the town needs to authorize council to commence what's called the rail banking process. And that's,
Say that again, Dan.
we need to have the select board authorize town council to commence the rail banking process, which is a formal process whereby the railway relinquishes control of the right-of-way to the town, with the caveat that if and when the rail right-of-way is needed again for freight or passenger rail, that it could be redone or taken over again by the railroad. So that's a way around some of the legal condemnation procedures that were taken in the initial part, initially for the railroad.
With that statement, do we have a delay of, say, 5 years where we can maintain control of that land, or can they take it over the day we're done building?
There's a process. They have to reapply and go through the Surface Transportation Board, which is a federal agency, and it has to be a real use. It can't just be because they want to do it now. Obviously, they're not going to spend lots and lots of money to redo a rail spur unless they have a real economic reason to do so, which frankly is unlikely for several decades, as far as I can imagine, but it could happen. And but that is the way that the rail banking process works, and they've been done thousands of miles of rail trails throughout the country.
So, but it could. Worst case scenario, things could move quickly through the government
But
agencies.
I mean, I don't know if it is a worst case scenario. Let's say that we got passenger rail back to Bennington Station.
Right.
I really think that is a horrible thing. So
Right.
that would be probably the only reason that it would be retaken. But it is a process that's used throughout the country for these rail right-of-ways. So that's number one. I've already talked to town council and he's prepared to do that moving forward. That is probably a year-long process, just so folks know, a best-case scenario. But again, we could commence that process. The other step that we'll need to take is we do currently have a consultant, V8B. They're a national firm, and they will need to complete the survey of the rail corridor, finalize the rail trail design, and develop construction documents for the bidding process. That all could happen fairly quickly, but because of the rail banking process, we'll probably spread it out over a year. So that's the way forward, and as long as you folks feel comfortable with that, we do have, like I said, we have the money in reserve, we have detailed estimates that show the cost is within what we believe it will be, and we have now have written confirmation from the railway that they're willing to work with us going forward. So I don't need any motion or anything like that, but I just want to feel comfortable that the board feels.
Well, I just want, Dan, we've got the map in front of us, and just explain from known landmarks in town where this is, because there's some confusion out there that it's out to Johnson Control, others out to 7A. Why don't you start?
Sure, let me run through that. Let me start with close to downtown. Everyone's familiar with Bennington Station. So the path would essentially follow the railroad tracks, well, at least of the railroad tracks, actually, excuse me. Follow the railroad right away from Bennington Station up to the vicinity of the Molly Stark School, Orchard Road. And that would,
Okay, we'll cross it right there in Cumberland Farms. You go behind Cumberland Farms out to Molly Stark, right?
yes, it would.
Okay.
It would basically cross Kosher Drive, actually Benmont and then
Right.
Kosher Drive, go about essentially in front of the CVS Pharmacy to Orchard Road, and then continue, then there'd be a spur up to Molly Stark School. That's the project that's funded by the state. However, we do get an extra little bonus out of this. As part of the rail banking process, the railroad is going to rail bank all the way up to area, to the Furnace Brook, which is essentially an area behind the Applegate Housing Complex, which is several hundred feet beyond Orchard Road, and we'll be able to use that as a pathway as well. That won't be funded by the grant, but because of the way that the rail will be removed, we'll have a great cinder trail that can be used by anyone in that vicinity, and it actually creates a great connection between Applegate and the Molly Stark School.
And that's what people were complaining about earlier, right? Not having that path right
That
there.
walkway, right?
Well, there's no sidewalks along Orchard
Right.
Road.
But looking for that
This gives them
alternative.
another safe route in there.
Yep.
Much safer, it's separated from traffic. What we're foreseeing happening here is very likely there's at least 2 outfits that will come in and remove the tracks essentially for free for the scrap value. Now, we have to use some of that railroad track to reconstruct what's called a runaround track in the Johnson Controls area for the railroad. That's so they can turn around their locomotives at that dead end right there at Johnson, in the vicinity of Johnson Controls. However, we do think there's enough salvageable track that we can essentially get the initial path completed for almost no cost. The real cost is going to come from doing the signals essentially at Kosher Drive and Benmont. That signalization will probably be one of the biggest costs. And even bigger cost is the railroad runaround track. That's going to be well over 50% of the cost, is to get the railroad that runaround track in exchange for their giving us control of the railroad right away.
Is that within the right-of-way, railroad right-of-way, that
Yes,
runaround?
yep, that runaround track. That's the one thing that we have to make absolutely sure of, and that's why I mentioned in the memo that the survey is essential first step to make sure we don't have to get any additional land. The good thing about that vicinity is we have landowners on each side, so if one doesn't want to play ball, we have another landowner.
Do we know what that, I saw a cost in there for this runaround track, but do we actually know what it looks like? Because there is a side track there.
Yes.
Already.
And that's why the consultant feels very, we're going to have to take all that track up and redo it, but the consultant feels very confident there's sufficient right-of-way there that we won't have to take any, have to negotiate any land. We want to make absolutely sure of that right-of-way. That would be the first step. The consultant actually feels so confident about that, they don't consider that a real risk. The only issue there may be is some small clipping of rights-of-way when we do street crossings and that sort of thing.
Where I'm puzzled is they don't have that now, that runaround track. They use that track now. Why can't they use it in the future like they're using it now to pull abandoned boxcars all the way into the town of Bennington with?
This is why it's taken me 15 years to get there. Their claim is that they have a runaround track in the downtown area. It's
Really?
not functional. It cannot be used, given the current condition. However, their feeling is, look, this is an asset that we own.
Right.
And we have rights to
So
it.
let's not
The
fight it.
state of
Let's
Vermont
take it
actually
again.
owns it, but they have rights to it. This is what we want in exchange. And, it's a tough pill to swallow, but the state's funding 90% of this project. They're in support of it, and we have the funds in reserve to do the project. So we're going to play ball with the railroad, if you guys feel comfortable with that, and try to get this rail trail finally completed.
When they're gonna pull up the trail, or the rail, is it the rail and the ties, or is it just the tail?
In fact, we're required as part of the rail banking process to remove all the track and all the ties.
Okay.
And that's all considered in the cost estimate. There is quite a bit of rail there, and because of the legislation that was passed several years ago at the state level, the town is entitled to the full scrap value of all that rail. which is good because that's going to help us to deal
Right.
with the runaround track as well as to pay for costs of removing the rail and the ties.
Well, my reason for saying that is if the ties were going to stay in place, that would be a bigger project for us to be able to smooth that off and.
Well, yeah,
to
they
do
got to
anything.
come out, and that's what these folks do.
It'd be relatively easy for us if they take the rails and the ties out of there to get in there and smooth that down and make it a walk path or a bike path or whatever.
That's what a couple of these outfits do. One of them is Iron Horse out of Massachusetts, and there's others in out west that come in. They have this machine that takes up the tracks, takes up the ties, and basically leaves a very smooth cinder path. Actually, I tell Stuart, I'd love to see it remain a cinder path, because as a runner, it's a nice soft surface.
Right.
But I think we're probably going to look to, if it's within the budget, again, it's up to the board to decide, probably look to pave at least the downtown portions up to Molly Start. Maybe we'll leave the cinder beyond that. So that also gives us some good wiggle room in the budget, you know, for even if pavement prices go through the roof, we still can have a cinder path and maybe pave, you know, a little bit each year. But right now, with the way the numbers are coming in, we think we can pave the whole thing as part of the project.
Okay, great. Board, Tom?
How long is this, the final product? Would you guesstimate?
A little over a mile, yeah.
Is there any chance that it'll ever be able to be tied into the Ninja?
Yes, we really hope that it will be, especially since it's going to go all the way up to Applegate. There are opportunities to break off and get it to Northside Drive and then back in behind the Walmart Plaza where we have the Ninja Trail. You know, maybe someday we will be able to follow the railroad right away up into North Bennington. Right now, the railroad is adamant that that's not appropriate, not going to happen, but, you know, it could happen someday. But absolutely, I see it as a way to link to the Ninja Trail as well as linking to the trail up to the middle school. So we have a nice complex of trails.
When looking at that and considering the project that we're, you know, the three roundabouts that we're looking at putting in, can we consider having a spot where a trail could cross?
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense, and we would definitely look to have good pedestrian and bicycle crossings at the necks of the roundabout.
Right, and even if it's not immediate, like you said, years to come, we might be able to link up.
Yeah, it's always important to keep thinking ahead with these kinds of things, because as I've learned, one of the hardest things to do is to get right away for trails. You know, one person can stop a project dead in its tracks, so no pun intended, and you really have to keep, you really have to be diligent with every project that comes down the pike, looking forward. You know, how can we keep a trail right away that can work in the future? Even if it doesn't happen for 20, 30, 40 years, it's important to take care of that.
So what I'm hearing, this is basically an update of a project we've had in the works for quite a while.
Yes.
And this is a good news story based on what we've been able to report in more recent years. And you don't need any approval for us or anything else to move forward on this except for approval to work with council to do the.
Well, I really don't, I'm not looking for any formal approval. I just want to make sure that you folks feel comfortable with the way staff is moving forward with this project. You know, we're not looking for a motion or anything. We just want to make sure your folks are up to date. People ask you questions, hey, what's going on with that rail trail? You can tell them now. We actually have a project. So, I mean, probably tomorrow I'll be talking to town council about formalizing an agreement with Vermont Rail so we can do the rail banking process, and I'll be contacting the developer to get an revised proposal and finishing up the project and getting that survey done as soon as possible.
Okay, board, anybody got any final questions to Dan?
I just applaud his diligence for
Yeah, right.
being so persistent with this the whole entire time I've been on this board. We've talked about
It's been a long road.
It's been a long road.
This is the closest we've ever been, and I feel really good about where we are. Again, we still got lots of things to do, but I think
We're making headway.
We're finally making headway here.
Well,
Greg?
it's nice to see it hook up with River Walk, and, you know, that's one of those things. This is all part of that long-term vision. I hear a lot of questions asking if there's lighting involved in any of this, in any places, in any key places. There are people in town that are worried about how we patrol it, how we keep it safe, and that thing, obviously. How does that play into our plan now that we're there?
When we do the final design, which again, we don't have yet, we would be looking at those areas that would make sense for lighting and make a determination at that time, whether or not we can, you know, the nice thing is we have some wiggle room in the budget now.
Right.
So we probably can do some lighting that we weren't so certain we could do before. So all that's going to come back to you folks. You're going to get to see all the designs and bless them and before they move forward, so.
Well, clearly, there's a lot of new technology since this was first conceived, as far as security,
Absolutely, yes.
lighting, and cameras or anything like
And
that, so
still
there's,
a possibility for some solar.
Right.
lighting and that sort of
Right.
thing, so, yeah, that's
A lot
helpful.
of possibilities. Okay, good. Good report, Dan, thanks.
Dan.
Can I ask for some clarification before you?
Go ahead, Mike, come on up again.
Is this path just going to go from the station to the Molly Stark area? I thought it
well-
was originally going to go to the North Bennington.
No, this portion of the path, no, this railroad has never indicated any willingness at all to give up that railroad right away, all the way to North Bennington. Although this does go much further than we had initially expected. Initially, we expected that it would stop at Worcester Road, and now it will go all the way up to Furnace Brook, which is basically.
7A, basically,
Of
yeah.
Applegate.
So Applegate to the station and station back, that's what this path is going to be.
This portion of it, yes. Yep.
And that's going to cost about $1 million.
Actually, we have estimates from anywhere from 500 to 700, but then you have to remember the major portion of that is the railroad runaround track.
That's over 300,000
That's
bucks.
being required by the railway to allow.
Down by Johnson Controls.
Who owns the property that's going to be on?
The railroad. Actually, it's the state of Vermont owns the right of way, the railroad has rights to it.
And if we redo North Side Drive and we put in 3 or 4 roundabouts, how are we going to cross people across from the station to?
Well, that's what I was just talking to John about. We'll be looking at crossings whenever we do any kind of redesign on Northside Drive, whether or not it's roundabouts or some other intersection improvements, to make sure there are safe crossings at every intersection.
Right, I know, but if you have lights or any safe crossing at a roundabout, we put in 3 roundabouts on North Side Drive to keep the traffic flowing, right? It doesn't defeat its purpose.
Actually, no, because of the way roundabouts work, they slow traffic down so much, it's actually relatively easy to get people to cross at the necks, so they have to yield.
And you can do just pedestrian flashes too now. There's, they have these lights that just go on when you hit the button. So people stop, you can go through the crossing, traffic will pick back up.
Station and they go for the Molly Stark area. How are they going to get back on to the Ninja, whatever?
The Ninja Trail.
Well, one of the ways we thought about it is the vicinity of Applegate coming out to Northside Drive there, crossing at the roundabout and going.
Behind
Applegate
Walmart.
system, Walmart,
Yeah.
So
back to Walmart.
you'd be going over this way and then back,
Right.
crossing twice across Northside Drive.
Not
No,
No.
once.
Just once. That follows the river all the way out to Bennington College, basically. So you could theoretically go out to 7A and find a way.
If you're coming from the station
Right.
downtown,
Sure.
going over, would there be an area where you could not have to go over to Applegate?
Oh,
You
yes,
just go
oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. We would expect most people going
With it down
to the
Hickson?
Northside Drive corridor would get up, wouldn't cross over to CVS, they just continue on.
Oh,
Up the
down
river.
on Northside Drive
On
and
the
south?
existing, sidewalk.
Okay, and then they cut back and go around.
So they
Yeah.
could-
Thank you.
Welcome, Mike. Okay, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
All right, next item, Stuart, anything on the manager's report?
Yeah, a couple of action items. The first has to do with our dates for the remaining meeting in December, and then dates for the budget work sessions. I've outlined for you, the 23rd of December, which would be our normal meeting date, falls just before the Christmas holiday. I'm suggesting that we meet at the town offices on the 16th, which is next Monday, at 5:30 PM. We would have the letter for your signature that we approved tonight, warrants, and then whatever other business the board brings to the fore would be all that we would be looking to do. The second, normally, we set aside 3 work sessions. They tend to be on a Saturday morning. I'm suggesting 8 a.m. I think in the past we've met at 8, we've met at 9. We generally meet till around noon. And in the past several years, it's only taken us 2 sessions. So I'm suggesting January 4th and January 11th with a reserve for January 18th. And that way we can finish up the budget. The warning would then be presented to you at your regular meeting on the 27th of January for approval, and we would then move forward with the annual town.
And that's the drop dead date in order to get to the printer, in order to get it out, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Anybody have any problems? He mentioned we can do is the 16th. However, if something important comes up, we can call a special meeting, and we can do a special meeting. But generally, and over the holiday periods, it's just a few light things. The warrants are the key things, so people can get paid their bills.
It's going to be a tough week for a lot of people.
Anybody have a problem with the 16th at 5:30?
No, that's a good
Okay.
idea.
Fine. Now, so those are the dates for the budget Any problems with the 4th, from 8 to roughly noon?
No.
No problems? Okay, how about the second date on the 11th?
Should be
Fine.
I see none, and the final date is, if needed, the 18th. And Stuart, are we going to have these taped like we have in the,
That really falls to
I-
determination by CAT TV, but.
we started this for the new board members, I think, the last time. I think it made good sense to, it's not published live, but taped, so people can see how we deliberate over the budget. Does anybody have a problem with us requesting CAT TV to give us that support again?
No, I've got a lot of good feedback about that.
Yeah.
That's a good
So
idea.
Stuart, if we can coordinate with CAT TV, not a live performance, but sort of taped performance, so it can be played. Okay? Any other action, Stuart?
Just one, and it's a relatively important one. Melissa has been working with the auditors to complete the FY13 audit, and Melissa, for those of you, is our finance director. She is now comfortable recommending that we pay down a portion of the rec center borrowing. And she gives you the reasons for it, but basically we have a little over $300,000 in excess funds in the budget. Now, this discounts the debt for Irene, but as you know, we are appealing our Irene debts, and we are feeling pretty confident that those will be satisfied to the greatest extent possible. So given that $310,000, these are general fund monies that are available to us. She is recommending a payment of $250,000 on the line of credit for the rec center. It will reduce the balance due to about $282,000. And we're hopeful over the next 8 years to be able to come back to you in a similar fashion with excess funds recommended to pay this down so that we don't ultimately have to go to a formal bonding or borrowing for this money. We're paying a relatively low interest rate on the funds. The bank is working with us as we roll it over on an annual basis, so we're paying the interest on it. But if we do this, it will reduce the amount of interest we have to pay in the coming year, and we suspect that we will be back to you at this time or earlier next year with a similar recommendation. But we do need you to make a motion to authorize this payoff.
Okay, so if we do not approve this, the money goes where?
It goes into the fund balance.
Everybody understand that? And it goes to the fund balance offset whatever we do on this fiscal year's budget, correct?
That's correct.
And I don't...
Can we look at any other debts and the interest rates that we're looking at for those other projects that might have been done?
This is the only project that we currently have in the general fund that these funds can be allocated to. The other general fund debts are bond indebtedness through the state bond bank. Those cannot be paid off. You cannot accelerate the payments on a bond payment because they're selling those bonds and the investors are looking for that on the long term. So this is the only debt we have in the general fund right now that would qualify for this payment, other than Irene. But we are seeking funds, obviously through FEMA, for the Irene expenditures, and so it makes this opportunity available to us.
Okay.
I'll move we authorize the expenditure of the excess of funds.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? We have a motion to transfer that money, use that money to pay down the loan we have on the rec center.
Yeah, when were we going to have to bond this?
We have another 8 years.
We have 8 years, and could this money, if we didn't put this towards the rec center, would we be able to put it towards the possible SVC project?
No.
No.
Okay.
That'd be
The
water line.
Has to
SVC
be
project,
done by-
it's being paid for out of the enterprise fund, which is the water fund.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor? And that is unanimous. Anything else, Stuart?
Just one last item there. If you look under the informational section of it, the Benmont Avenue Bridge is now scheduled to be bid next year and constructed in year 2015. Terry Morse came to me some time ago, within the last couple of months, suggesting that perhaps we want to consider adding a town water line to the underside of the bridge to give us a second water main crossing of the river. The initial crossing was down by the footbridge. Tropical Storm Irene did expose a portion of that line, and Terry is concerned that given its age and given its proximity to the surface of the water, that it might make sense to have a fail-safe mechanism in place. We lay out, and our engineers are working on this, but it looks like the total project cost would be around $340,000. The state would work the first 140 or so, the bridge portion, 200,000, into the bridge project. So we would be paying that over time to the state as it is constructed. And that would be an annual payment. Would not start until after the project was completed. And the second portion of it is to connect a short link from Hunt Street to the bridge itself on the southern side of the bridge. It's a project that makes sense. It falls within our annual construction cost of about $300,000 to $400,000 a year. And if everything goes well with the bridge, it will fall in that window before the SVC project begins to impact our budget.
And it won't impact us till either 16 or 17, right?
That's correct.
So you would stop using that line that's currently underneath all the
No,
building?
we would leave both in play, and should the other one fail, we would have, obviously have.
Backup.
What's the total, what's the difference in cost in doing this, is adding that line in specifically underneath that bridge?
It's $200,000 to connect from the area north of the bridge to the south side of the bridge itself. That the state will include as part of its project. And then we must do a link from the end of the state project to Hunt Street at Benmont Avenue, because the water line now runs down Hunt Street. So there's a short link that the state won't include as part of its project that we would have to do, much as we do the North Side Drive.
But it's simply there as a backup?
Yeah, it would be, probably become one of the main feeds. And in fact, they're, at least I believe Gardner's Auto is currently using a well. They're not connected to the municipal system because it's not available to them. So we pick up a customer that doesn't now exist. But this would probably become the main feed because of its location and where it's located.
So the other line would eventually be shut down, or?
It could be. It could be. One of the things that we try to do in the system is where we can, we try to loop the system so we have two ways to feed a neighborhood. This would provide us a second way of feeding that area of Northside Drive with water, which means that if you've got a break that occurs in one of the other lines, still can provide water to the system. And you know, Northside Drive has been one of our problematic lines over all these years. When we have a problem there, we shut down everybody that goes beyond the break. This, I think, helps to that degree. Justin, I think it would be probably something we would have to decide on as we move forward as to whether or not that line under the footbridge is still ultimately necessary. Right now it's intact. Right now it's providing sufficient water supply, but the risk is that it's very near the surface.
See, I'd like, you got to hear for information. I think it'll make more sense, though, if we talk about this when we talk about the budget, see what other projects we have planned right now for fiscal year 16 and 17, and to see if it's going to be a
Glad
greater
to do
impact
that.
or
I
whatever.
just wanted to bring it to your attention now.
And this again would be covered, this would be a water enterprise fund issue again?
Yes.
Yes.
And it falls within what we're budgeting annually for construction projects anyway. So if it's a project we decide to move forward with, it's going to fall within that.
So it's not in addition to?
No.
What is the
Well,
schedule on
laid
that
out,
bridge at this point, Stuart?
It will be bid for construction next year.
Okay.
And FY14, the state's FY14 actually, I think, runs September 13 to October 14, or vice versa, October to
Yeah,
September.
September.
So we're not looking at this project as something that's going to negatively affect water rates again?
No, this should not affect the water rates at all.
Okay.
And so we're looking at calendar year, probably 2015.
John, other business?
I do not.
Justin?
I do not.
Jimmy?
I've got just an amusing anecdote that I just want to share, and it has to do with the panhandlers ordinance. Last Monday, I was at my cart at noontime, and this young woman came up to me and introduced, she didn't know I was a selectman. She introduced herself as a Channel 10 reporter, and she said, we're doing a story on the panhandling story, and we've been driving around town for the last half hour, and we can't find any panhandlers. You know where we can find them?
So it's working.
It's working. Tom?
That's it.
Nothing.
Great.
One thing, the Aqua Zumba on warrants caught my attention as well, but mostly because I had bugged Stuart a while back about our website and the schedules for the rec center being available to the public and all that, and that has been taken care of. So if you are interested in things at the rec center, their schedules are on our website, benningtonvt.org, and you can see the pool schedule, all that sort of stuff. So thanks for that, and that's it.
Sharon?
I have nothing.
Joe, I'm sorry, I do have one other thing.
Go ahead, Joe.
You asked a question last week about monies being pushed towards Rutland for solar projects, right? And I think during the buyout.
From the state?
From GMP.
Yeah, okay.
I think from the buyout with, was it
CVPS.
CVPS. I think that there was something built into that.
Okay.
That pushed that because they were selling it to GMP and they were so, I don't know, Rutland-oriented, that they had to help Rutland out as well.
Okay.
Not that I like it, but that's what I think's happening.
Thanks, Stuart, for his Christmas present to us. And then we'll open the budget. Give us a chance to look at it, folks.
No poll.
At our time. It do help for you new folks. We do go through it line by line. Stuart, do you know who you're going to bring up first?
I haven't set the schedule yet. I guess that'll depend on perhaps after you folks have had a look at it.
Okay.
You tell me maybe what you think ought to go first, and we'll have the
Okay.
department heads available to you.
That's great. I had a note, I lost select board from Joanne. They have a chamber mixer Christmas. I think it's this Saturday, the 14th. Anybody know?
No, it's the 17th.
The 17th at the Welcome
Visitor
Center.
5:30 at the Welcome Center.
Okay, it is the 17th?
And it is an open house. It's not considered a chamber mixer.
Got it, okay. It
It's
was an
an open
invitation to all of
house.
us that wanted to go there, but that's great, thank you.
It's
Glad you
a, yeah, it's a Wednesday.
Wednesday. All
Wednesday the
right.
17th?
18th?
18th?
No, it's, I think it's.
I've got it on my calendar, I'll send you all a note to make sure.
Yeah.
And to the viewers, this will be our last televised before the Christmas holidays. I want to wish you a great, safe holiday. I ask you to remember the kind of hazards that go along with holidays: excessive drinking, driving, bad weather, fires in your homes and things like that. Please check everything out. We've been blessed so far along these big holidays. We haven't had any major catastrophes. We don't want to lose any lives. So please accept my wishes for a happy holiday and spend the new year. And it's been a busy year. Looking for a busy year next year. We do have need to go into executive session for legal action with
Be very brief.
with the EPA.
Not the EPA.
Who is it with?
It's a contract.
May involve our
That's right.
discussions with you.
Okay.
I'll move to go into executive session for
Have a
legal.
motion? Second. All in favor? Okay, we're in executive session.